Hey everyone, Ash Manson here, and it has been one hell of a day. I barely know what to say. It has been a positive news day in the United States of America. Yes, Tuesday, August 6th, I believe, 2024 was a positive news day in the United States of America. I cannot believe it. As a progressive or anyone who's even remotely left of center in the furthest right wing country in the developed world, which is the United States of America, the news is typically blow after blow after blow. But we got good news today. We got the news that the presumptive nominee for the Democrats going into the presidential election here in November, Kamala Harris, has named, in my opinion, the best governor in the country, the governor of my home state of Minnesota, Tim Walz, as her running mate. And in one of my past videos, I gave my half-assed endorsement of Kamala Harris for president. And basically, what I meant by that is that, like, there's really not enough in Kamala's political history to really flesh out what her beliefs are. I think if you dig too much into her history as a prosecutor, that would be a little bit out of context as far as trying to like devise a presidential platform. Sure, there's some things that you can glean from that, but ultimately I view Kamala Harris as more of a blank slate. But her first big move as the presumptive nominee was to name the most progressive, the best governor in the country as her running mate. That is like absolutely mind-blowing. And the reason for it is that historically Democrats have always conceded conservative framing. They're always so terrified of coming off as radical that they do so much to pander to the perceived center, a demographic that really doesn't exist because the Democrats are a center-right party, the Republicans are a far-right party. The center of that is still a pretty damn far right-winger. Like, a true centrist in the United States of America would be considered a radical left because of how far right we are as a country. But yeah, this imagined demographic, the suburban voters or whatever, that Democrats always try to pander to, they're so afraid of seeming popular with the vast majority of people who lean at least somewhat to the left. Kamala Harris picking Tim Walz as her vice president is a signal that us progressives are welcome in the coalition that she is building. And I don't have delusions of grandeur about this. I know that, her picking Tim Walz does not mean that she is going to do a whole bunch of progressive things necessarily. But when you're used to get beaten to death by the Democratic establishment as a progressive, just constantly, the Democrats do so much more to defeat progressive ideals than they ever do to beat Republicans. But all of a sudden now they're doing things to include us. They're doing coordinated messaging campaigns. They're calling those weird ass Republicans freaking weird because that's what they are. They're actually trying to win elections, and this is almost it's an emotional pick for me, not only because it's in my home state. I haven't lived in Minnesota in 10 years. Minnesota is a lot more aligned with me politically than the state that I live in Florida. But 10 years ago, I thought I was moving to a swing state. I didn't think I was moving to a right-wing dystopia. And while my governor, Ron DeSantis, is setting a national example of just being the absolute worst, being the most cruel on so many things, such as women's rights, such as trans rights, such as like defunding state agencies like flood protection while our streets are flooding right now. DeSantis has been an example of the worst kind of governor, whereas my home state, the state I lived in for 27 years, their governor is setting an example of what effective government looks like. And it's personal to me, not just because I'm from Minnesota, but because my wife is 5 months pregnant right now. And Governor Walz has been able, with a simply a one-seat majority in his state legislature, has been able to pass so much good legislation, universal background checks for gun purchasing, legalizing cannabis. Hey, I don't even smoke, but let's get past this whole dystopic idea that we're supposed to lock people up for smoking weed. That's insane. But like the stuff that more affects me personal is like paid sick and family leave. They now guarantee at least partial pay for expecting parents and sick people. My wife had to go to work not 5 months pregnant and sick today because she's not guaranteed sick leave. That's just the way things are in Florida. Guess what? My job does not have paternity leave. That means any time that I want to spend with my son after he's born, that's going to be unpaid. And quite frankly, if I didn't have credit cards, and I know this isn't healthy, but it's just gonna have to be the way it is. If I didn't have credit cards, I wouldn't be able to afford my mortgage payment if I took any time off of work after my son is born, because it's not guaranteed, neither on the federal level nor on the state level here in Florida. If I still lived in my home state, I would be paid at least a portion of my salary while I was spending time in the very most important moments of my son's development. So yeah, it's personal. It's very personal. It's really disheartened me to see Ron DeSantis use Florida as a platform to audition for president. And so much of the little stunts that he performed weren't substantive. He just wanted to vice signal to the MAGA base to show, hey, I'm every bit as messed up as Donald Trump is. And in doing so, he turned Florida into a political hellscape. And I love Florida. I love living here. In Greater Tampa Bay, I am exactly where I want to be, geographically, but politically, it's been atrocious. Whereas Minnesota, Governor Walz and his state legislature have been a shining example of what effective government looks like. And another thing about Tim Walz is when they go after him with the socialism charge, or they're saying he's too liberal, he's like, I am putting food in children's mouths. I am making the streets safer. I'm guaranteeing paid family leave. I'm such a monster. If they want to throw those terms at me for doing things that are objectively good, that I will wear that label as a badge of honor. He doesn't shy away from being too left. And mind you, any of these policies that are too left, too liberal, socialism, all the lazy tropes that the right wing likes to throw, are just basic, common sense human rights anywhere else in the developed world. The United States of America is the only country in the developed, industrialized world that does not guarantee these things as human rights. And again, I am not having delusions of grandeur. I know simply picking Tim Walz does not mean that we are going to be guarantee family leave, and we're going to reinstate a woman's right to choose and pass universal background checks on a federal level. I know these things are complicated. There's so many conservative layers of suppression in between the will of the people and actual legislation. And that's just the extremely flawed system that we live under. But goddammit, for the first time in a very long time, I have a small bit of hope. So I am throwing, for the very, very little bit of influence, almost no influence that I have, I am throwing my complete endorsement behind presidential nominee, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, and the best governor in the country, hopefully future Vice President Tim Walz. Until next time, revel in what you are, my friends.